you've kind of already touched on it, but when you think about the significance of movements over time, why is it that they matter? And that may seem like a very obvious question, but I have a slightly different way of looking at it as to like, why do we need so many? Like, it almost feels like there's so many movements. I mean, you heard we.
Well, I mean, the we is important to framing the question, because are you talking about the plight of African Americans in this country? Are you talking about the plight of women in this country? I mean, they're integrated at certain aspects, but I dare not say that my struggles are the same as yours. And I would argue that your struggles as a Black woman in this country are far greater than mine.
That's the end of our program, and we thank you all for being here. This is actually the point of this whole thing. Sorry, this has never happened in a space with a Black person.
But movement, first of all, after I have this argument back and forth a lot with my editor. I just finished my third book.
Congrats.
Thank you. And after you go through an nadir or a very dark point, usually, and King said it best, he said, only when it's darkest can you see the stars. And so for a lot of people, George Floyd was emblematic of so much because of the time period that we were in. I was with Felonious yesterday, George's brother. We flew in from Houston together to DC. And George Floyd, and it's a unique conversation to have because I don't think people analyze George Floyd in the correct manner. Why was George Floyd, or why was that such a powerful moment in our history? And I would argue that there were a few things. One, George Floyd would not have been as powerful if we were not in a pandemic. The fact that we were in a pandemic, everybody was home and they had to repeatedly watch that video over and over and over again, made people want to react and feel some type of way. And two, it took an entire globe coming outside for there to be any accountability for Black folk. And there's a difference between justice and accountability. Justice is George Floyd being at Thanksgiving this year. Accountability is his officers going to prison. And so you have to be clear about the language. But there is a natural line between George Floyd and Emmett Till and Medgar Evers. And I think there's a natural progression. Your question is cool, but I don't think your question is the right one.
Well, somebody changed the question on the card, Bakari.
I'm about to give you the right question to ask. I got you. But the question has to be, like, why does progress in this country cost Black people so much? Because I would argue every ounce of progress we've ever had in this country is because of Black blood that flowed through the streets. Mm-hmm. And people watching, they'll be like, so what do you, give me an example? And I say, well, you wouldn't have the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act if you didn't have the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And the Edmund Pettus Bridge was a classic example because it was the first time that white people in America were able to see brutality against Black folk because it actually aired on nightly news, right? You wouldn't have the Fair Housing Act of 1968 but for the assassination of King. We wouldn't even be talking about criminal justice reform but for George Floyd. And so I think the question, instead of asking about movements, one of the challenges of our generation is lowering the price for change in this country. Because right now, it's very costly for us.
So lowering the price for Black people. Yeah, agreed. And I'll take it one step further. The Immigration Act, that was part of the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, that is essentially what has brownified our country. Because prior to that, there were quotas on anybody coming into this country outside of Western Europe. So 100% absolutely. So how do we get there to a place where the evolution of our democracy does not require the blood of Black people flowing?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. No. I mean, if I knew.
I'm like, well, we got to do, because that's what we're trying to figure out. Like,
but I don't know the answer to that question.
Is it possible?
You would, yeah, that's called hope.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you want to live in I have children. They'll be 5 in January. You want them to live in a country where they don't have to go through despair to have change. And I don't know if that's possible, but that's why you have hope.
Well, is part of it helping to shift the narrative? Because what you just said, I don't think most white people and others appreciate about the role that Black people have played in advancing democracy in this country. Because when they come through the door,
Well, that's a harsh generalization. Now, I don't think white people need an advocate in this
Mm.
conversation. But for example, I was giving a speech yesterday, and my brain just took me there. I wasn't intentionally going there, but ended up talking about coalition building in the middle of my stream of consciousness as I was speaking, and was talking about Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. And so we have to acknowledge. And one of the things that we have to realize, I guess, as we're going through and we're talking through the answers to that question that you asked
Mhm.
of how do we get there. I mean, I think it takes coalition building. I think it takes, and I mean, we can't do this by ourselves.
Yeah.
I also tell people that racism in this country, which is not necessarily what we're talking about, but racism in this country is not on us to fix.
But it always is on us to fix.
No, it's not. I got a lot of burdens to bear.
Yeah, but
I fuck up a lot,
Yeah.
and I have a lot to fix.
Yes.
But that ain't one of the things I have to fix.
But we say that in a moment where at Black Innovation Alliance, we just launched this campaign called the Clapback, which is in response to all of this misinformation that is being hurled out into the public space. And who is it falling to in order to right this conversation? Black people. So while I would aspire to a world where that didn't fall to us to fix, that's not the current reality.